Everybody ready? Okay, cool. Well, obviously, thanks everyone for being here tonight. I'm Eric Weiss. It's great to be here to talk to a new wave of entrepreneurs and product developers. So my purpose for tonight, why I'm here, is to talk to you about a different approach to building companies and building products than a lot of companies do and what you might be familiar with. And what that is it's about building companies around a group of people that you care really strongly about, and then developing products that solve their problems and meet their needs, as opposed to chasing after wealth or growth or status, or simply creating products for their own purpose. I think this is cool. Let's see who I can sell this thing to, right? And so there's a couple ways we do this. One is about creating a culture in your company that focuses on, again, putting yourself in service to your users. And the other is getting in the mind of your users. So shedding your own paradigms, your own mental models, and adopting those of your users so that you can actually build real meaningful products, solve real problems, and find real product market fit. And then all of those things like wealth and growth and status and so on will simply come from that. They'll grow out of that. All right. By the way, can you all hear me in the back? I feel like I have to yell.
Is your mic?
The mic is only for the video, but if you all can hear me okay, then I'll just keep yelling. You want me to do the mic? That's okay. I can yell.
Well, keep yelling, and then
I'll keep yelling. Cool. All right. So I'm Eric Weiss. I'm a software engineer by trade. I've done everything there is to do around developing products. So I've been a software developer. I've been in IT. I've done DevOps. I've done QA. Everything from the engineering side. And then at a certain point, I moved over to more of the product of the business side. So why did I do that? Why am I even here today? So this, is that good? Is that better? Yes. All right, cool.
hold it up.
I don't want to hold up too much.
Almost touching your mouth.
Almost touching it? All right. It's all better? Can you hear me now? All right. So I don't have to yell. Thank you, Austin. Right, so how I got here is that throughout my career in engineering, I always had this kind of sickening feeling where I felt like I was just the cog in the machine, right? How many of you have had that kind of, said that to yourself? I'm the cog in the machine. And it's,
Keep the mic up.
and it's,
Touching your chin.
and it's because,
Yes.
let's see how long I can do this.
I'm your customer, and my problem is that I can't hear you, and I need you to solve that for me.
And I am in service to you, my customers today. Right, so as an engineer, I was too far removed from the purpose. Right, I was too disconnected from what we were trying to achieve. And it was mainly the reason why I left every company I ever did, is because I just felt like, well, I'm just building a widget. Why am I here? What am I doing? Oh, well, maybe the next job will be better. I've been sold on this thing. So I got my MBA, and I moved to the product side because I wanted to be closer to that purpose. I started doing project management and product management, and I did a stint as chief technology officer, which is literally all of those jobs smashed into one. And where I've kind of focused is there's always been this chasm between the visionaries of the company and the builders, right? So if you have a product manager or CEO, they've got this grand vision, and hopefully it's an altruistic vision, or we actually want to we want to make the world a better place or something. But if then you ask the engineers, what the vision, what the purpose is. You know, either they can't tell you, or they just don't care, or they're going to give you a whole bunch of different answers. And so I've always been, as a technology leader, that bridge between the big picture and the engineers, right? So as a big part of my leadership of my team, it's instilling that confidence and that inspiration into them. This is why we're here. This is the mission. These are the users. These are the people that we're really dedicating ourselves to, right? We're here, we're sacrificing our time, our sleep, our money, our relationships, our health, for what? For the lottery ticket, right? That 90% of you will fail to achieve. If that's why you're in it, hate to break it to you, you're gonna have a long and unfulfilling career, right? But on the other hand, if you dedicate yourself to the service of people that matter to you, that you care deeply about, the product will naturally be the best solution to their most complicated problems. And they're going to love you. They're going to give you wonderful kudos and feedback, and you're just going to feel that love, and everyone at your company is going to feel it. So, so it says I'm the former CTO of Rockland. I actually quit my job 2 weeks ago. I strongly recommend it to anyone else. You should all quit your jobs. No, so I quit my job. Why? Because I was burned out. So why was I burned out? I did the 5 whys exercise. You know, I burned out. So I was exhausted. I was irritable. I was detached. I wasn't spending enough time with my family. I was out of shape. I was, you know, arguing with my wife. You know, whatever it is. Well, why did I do all those things? It's because I didn't feel like the investment was worth it. I didn't feel like I was making good use of my time. I felt like the time that I was spending with my family was more important than the time that I was spending at work. So every minute that I was there, I was resenting it. And then all the other little things that happen throughout the day, the frustrations and the stress that just naturally come with building a company. Sorry, I have to get used to this. You know, there's no respite from it, right? You know, you get in a fight with, you know, I get in a fight with my CEO, or, you know, we do a big release and it falls flat, or we don't make our numbers, or whatever it is, and that becomes the only thing that matters because all we care about is the money, right? But all along the way, there's people whose lives that we're impacting for better or worse, but we're not keeping that at the top of our mind. So I quit. And now I'm going to do consulting, and I'm going to try to take this show on the road and change as many companies as I can to try to create this model. So, long introduction to me, obviously, but kind of how I got here. This is my journey. So the model is 2 parts, right? It's a philosophy about your company and about how you build products. And obviously, it's a set of tactics and strategies and tools that you can use to employ it. And we'll get into pretty deep detail here. So before I dive in, I forgot, I wanted to survey the audience here. So how many people here are students? A few. Okay, how many are professionals? A bunch. How many engineers? Engineering disciplines. How many non-engineers? Business, creative. Okay, a lot of creative professionals. Okay. How many of you have built a product or a startup already? Okay, and how many of you plan to in the future? Okay, interesting. So a lot of entrepreneurs, people in the works, people planning on it, a lot of creative folks. Cool, okay. So let's get far out. So the model is user-centered design. Okay, I didn't make this up. All this stuff is off the shelf, right? The stuff you're going to see in the slides is off the shelf. It's the philosophy I really want to get across. So user-centered design is the discipline of taking your users' perspective and making it a part of the fabric of how you create your product. Everything from the very first concept and ideation, through development, through your customer service, through your analytics, everything in between is gathering as much user input as you possibly can by any means necessary, and creating these really tight feedback loops so that at every step of the way you're making an informed decision that's being driven by your users and not by the opinion of your CEO, or the last conference you went to, or, you know, something that, you know, you came up with at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, all those things are great, but the thing that really should be driving you is your users. And so that's it. So what is the way that we do this? And it's capturing, first you have to do is you have to capture your user perspective. And you have to incorporate that, again, in every step of your process. So let's talk a minute about mental models. Okay? Everyone here is unique. Everyone in the world is a unique individual. You've had your own upbringing, you have your own culture, your own family, your own preferences, experiences, and so on. Cool?
I got it.
No worries. Just roll with it. So even if you look at the person sitting next to you, and that person looks just like you, or you think you're developing a product for you, for people just like you, I guarantee you that is not the case. You are not your user, and you have a myopic view. So if you're sitting in this room today, and you're an engineer, or you're an entrepreneur, you're going to build a product, I guarantee you you're too smart, and you're too close to the product to understand what your users are actually experiencing, right? And you're also probably very confident as well, as entrepreneurs tend to be. So you think your opinion is what matters. You think you're right. And you're gonna, people do this all the time, and then they release a product and they wonder why their churn rate's so high, they wonder why their retention rate's so low, they wonder why their customers are complaining. So what you have to do is you have to shed your own mental models, your own paradigms. You have to get a deep understanding of your users, and you have to become them, right, in as much as possible. So first, what is their perspective? It's everything. It's everything that makes up their entire human experience, their whole mind, right? So it's their wants and their needs, their struggles and their fears, their language, their culture, their environment, their family, their coworkers. It's everything that they consume. It's everything that they use. It's their entire reality, right? So how can you expect to know what is right for them if you're that far removed from everything that they are, right? And if you go out building a product where you've got your target market at arm's length and you think you know what's best for them, you're never going to be able to understand them and to create a process that really works in their environment. So to do this, and this is really the core of the philosophy here, in order to do this, again, you have to shed your mental models. And if you can do this, you create empathy in the philosophical sense, okay? So empathy is not, I feel what you're feeling. It's, I experience your experience, right? So, if you have a kid and I don't have kids, I can say, well, congratulations, right? But if I have kids, I've had that experience, I can say, I feel what you're feeling, right? I have empathy for you. And so by doing this, we're able to gain and create empathy for our users. So let me give you an example. Let's get a little concrete for a second. So my last company, we made a music app for runners called Rock My Run. And this product worked spectacularly well when you were sitting in the office developing the product, okay? So if I'm at my desk or we're in the conference room and man, this thing is amazing. It works flawlessly. The design is beautiful. Everything's perfect. You take one step outside, okay? And you realize, oh, wow, the sun shines on the phone and the contrast and I can't read this. Or, I've got the phone in my armband and I go to hit this button, but the buttons are too close together and I hit the wrong button and now I'm fiddling with it. Or I'm at a race and there's 15,000 other people here and they're hammering the cell towers and now I have no network reception. So as soon as, if you have this myopic view of the world, which you do to whatever degree, as soon as your product goes out into the real world, you're going to start seeing where that falls down. We had a blind guy that wrote into support that wanted to use Rock My Run. And, we're all thinking like, dude, you shouldn't be running, But, he wanted to use it for exercise or what have you. But, there's this whole world of like accessibility and apps that like we just weren't even thinking about, right? It's just a totally different worldview, and we're completely, I guess pun intended, blind to it. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's talk a little Zen here. So there's a meditation exercise that I discovered. I actually started doing it with my daughter. My daughter's 4. She's very rambunctious and very spirited, and she talks a lot, and she gets in trouble. for talking. She gets in trouble for getting out of her chair, for just being rambunctious. And I had this realization that all that noise, it's just a symptom, a product of a noisy mind. Okay, so maybe I can just, instead of yelling at her, reprimanding her, let me see if I can just sort of calm her down. And so we started doing just simple breathing exercises, right? She'd throw a tantrum, just take her aside. Okay, baby, let's do 10 deep breaths. 1 deep breath and she stops crying. And by 10, she's happy and she's off, she's running again, she's good to go. And so that kind of got me interested in it. I started doing it myself when I was at my last company and I was burning out. I started doing meditation. And so I stumbled on this one that really tied into this really well and kind of formulated this thesis that I'm having here. So we go out into nature and I take my daughter, I say, okay, Melody, see that tree over there? Imagine you are that tree, okay? You get out of your mind and go into that tree. Okay, so close your eyes, put your arms up in the air and wiggle your fingers, right? And dig your toes into the floor and, imagine your toes are these roots that go deep down into the earth and you're sucking up the liquid and the nutrients and, okay, you're a tree. Now imagine you live 250 years and you spend your whole life standing in one place. And you start to imagine that perspective, that stillness, that peace. But at this point, you're still a human mind in the body of a tree. So the next level is I have to actually change my perspective, right? I have to get rid of my eyes and my ears. And I have to start feeling and experiencing the world the way a tree does. And at that point, you become awakened. Now, that didn't make any sense to my daughter, and it didn't make any sense to me, but that's the progression. And you're supposed to start out with these very simple, rudimentary beings, a tree or a coffee cup or a rock, and you progressively move towards more sophisticated and nuanced beings. And as you do that, you're able to, again, embody and experience the nuance of being something else. And eventually, at a high stage of enlightenment, you can do this to another human being. And once you can do that, now you're a Zen master, right? You are connected to every other being, every yoga mat, every window, every person, every bird, every tree in the entire universe. And, I guess you go off into the stratosphere. So that's what kind of led me to this. Now, you definitely don't have to be a Zen master to get this. And in fact, if you do, you're probably completely mad and you're not building products anyway. But that is as far down that path as you can get in a practical sense, right? This isn't spiritual here. This is purely a mental exercise, right? It's a game that you can play with yourself that will allow you to gain perspective and allow you to turn off some of your biases and some of your preconceived notions and paradigms. And allow you to truly understand what other people are going through. So how we tie this into the actual development process, okay? A little more tactical here, right? It's that your users are the core of your process, but they're in between every single step of the way. So it's all about creating feedback loops, okay? And there's different ways of doing this. You start out this process. Now I'm assuming that you are, just starting a company, okay? Things are different for companies at different sizes. You have different, challenges, but let's say you're starting out a company from scratch. And you start at the research phase. This is an intimate engagement. You're building a strong bond with some community, some group of people, to which you are literally going to be dedicating your lives for the next 5 years, 10 years, your entire life, whatever that might be, right? And so you want to create this relationship, so there's a lot of face time here. And you're creating surveys, and you're doing interviews, and you're trying to understand, what pain they're having. Now, something led you to this point. You're involved in this community somehow. You should be. And, there's some little spark, something like, oh, I see everyone seems to have this common problem. There's a common thread here. Well, let me dig deeper into that. Let me sit with people. Let me follow down that rabbit hole. And you shadow them. So, this could be literally like, pick me up in the morning. I'm going to buy you breakfast, buy you lunch, buy you dinner, and I'm going to be with you from when you leave the house in the morning until when you get home at night. I'm going to follow your entire journey. And I'm just going to observe everything I can, be completely, passive in this, understanding what you go through on a day-to-day basis, what products you use, what music do you listen to, what do you eat, what products do you use, what apps do you use, what websites do you go to. Just go about your day and let me just observe all these things about you. Then we get to the point where there's the actual pain that you're suffering that I think I can create a solution for. Okay, now we really hone in the spotlight. We get deep here. And every step, every click, every sigh, every groan, everything that they experience through that, you want to document. Video, if you can, annotate as well. And then you start asking questions. Okay, well, how does this process work for you? How does this tool that you're using today work for you? What's good about it? What's bad about it? What would you not want to give up? What would you change if you had a magic wand, right? This is kind of market research here. And you take all that, now we've got raw data, raw information. And then you take it to the concept phase. You start brainstorming, however you need to do it. You start coming up with ideas for how to solve that problem better. And they come in certain forms. There's typically, kind of an integration or a streamlining of disparate processes. There's maybe manual effort that can maybe be abstracted into a more, kind of one button type of process. Sometimes there's something completely new, but for the most part, most products are incremental improvements upon what's out there. And so you create these concepts, and as soon as you do, you're starting to create feedback loops with your user, where you're saying, well, here's this concept, this vision. Would this be cool? Would this help your problem? Would this help solve your problem? And you start creating the artifacts around the user and their journey. You start creating personas and user journeys and profiles and so on and so forth. And then you start to actually flow out, what is this solution going to be? What are the pain points that it has to solve, right? And what are the fundamental things that it has to do, right? Kind of shaping requirements. And then you move on to design, right? And now design it's graphic design, obviously, but it's the form, right? So you have the vision, the concept, and this is everything surrounding the form. Obviously, the graphics, the data models, the software architecture, the entire experience. How are they even going to discover? Even the marketing can be designed, at this stage. Now, not that it all has to be done before you put anything out there, but you start to create these low fidelity concepts and prototypes. You're feeding back through with your users, and then you're shedding the things that aren't working, and you're increasing the fidelity of the things that are working. Now, you can take this product to a pretty far state before you actually write a single line of code. You can have beautiful fleshed out designs. You can have prototypes that are functional, that have dummy data. You don't necessarily need any infrastructure. You can develop a UI if you like, but a lot of stuff you can do just with static images and static prototypes. Now, the way you go about building a product is kind of based on your discipline. If you're a non-technical founder, you're probably going to want to defer development costs as long as possible, right? You want to spend as much time fully understanding the problem, sketching out ideas, coming up with the vision as a founder before you actually start investing money and resources into engineering. If you're an engineer, maybe you just want to do this from the inside out. Maybe you just start building an ugly, sketchy sort of wireframe, but it's functional, right? So let me get something functional in your hands before we actually go, refining the design. There's different ways of approaching it. But ultimately, obviously, you have to develop a product, okay? Now, as you're doing that, now you start getting into beta testing, usability testing, and so on, so that your users are, again, with you every step of the way. So if you're doing Agile, you've got sprints, you've got, there's different ways that I'll talk about tactically to have touch points and feedback loops with people through the development process, and then this whole thing cycles, right? So you release an MVP, you get your product out there in the sketchiest form possible or with the minimal number of features possible, depending on your approach, and then you collect data, you do analytics and so on, you evaluate, and then once that product is out there, you start collecting information through customer service, surveys, and so on. That's kind of the high level of the process. So let's kind of go through a quick example here of the actual steps you can take. I originally had this laundry list of things here. What we're talking about is essentially the disciplines of UX, user interaction, user interface, software design, architecture, and so on. So we'll go through some of these tools, but there's obviously a lot more to it. So I mentioned interviews and shadowing, right? So we sit down with someone at the point, it has to be in the situation that they're feeling the pain, right? And that's where you're observing them have the pain, right? In situ, having that experience in real time. You collect all that information, okay, and you create personas. Now this is one way of doing it. This is kind of a common archetype for a user persona. There's different ways of doing it. If you want to do video, you can write stuff with crayons. Whatever you want to do to somehow capture and convey who the person is. Put a human face on the problem that you're solving and who you're solving it for. Okay. And again, as product leaders, as a founder, as a CEO, as a product manager, what have you, your job is to evangelize the human to everyone at the company, right? So everyone from the executives to the developers to the janitors are all there. They're coming to work every day with a purpose. Okay, this is why we're here. This is who we're doing this for. These are the problems that they're having, and here's why we care about their success. Okay, and you might have a few of these, right? There's different use cases and different people and so on. So you take this persona, that's one aspect of it. Who is the person? I'm a big fan of mood boards. Has anyone done this before? A few folks? Yeah? So it's an exercise that I appropriated from graphic design and really ran with it. So what this is again, trying to put yourself in the mind and the shoes, of who these people are. Through this interview process, you're taking down everything you can about who they are. What brands do they like? What products do they use? What apps do they use? What websites do they go to? What kind of music do they listen to? What language do they speak? What's their culture? What's, everything that I can about them, and you create this collage, you did it in art class as a kid, right? And this is just every visual image that you can create that sums up visually this person as a human, right? The personas and words and graphs, this is visual. And what I found really success with this is obviously from a graphic design perspective, they're looking at, well, okay, their favorite apps or favorite products, what fonts do they use? What's their color palette? Things like that, and then they appropriate those to create a sort of, an experience that blends well with their daily life. But even the developers need to appropriate the products and the apps that they're using and making sure that they're developing the products in a similar way. So another example, so say you're making a music app, and say I'm an Apple Music user, okay? I'm going to make my music app sort of feel like Apple Music, okay? It's gonna have similar conventions or navigation or so on. It's gonna have a similar feel. But if all of my users are Spotify users, then they're gonna use my app and it's just not gonna feel right. It's not gonna fit well with their mental models, their paradigms. And so we've actually said, okay, you guys all have to start using these apps or go to these, make these products a part of your life so that you can, again, get one step closer to fully understanding these people. Even going so far as decorating your office, right? In the color palette, in the fonts, in the, play the music that they listen to, right? When you walk into work every day, it's like you're there, you're with them all along the way. It's subtle, it's subliminal even, right? But now you're starting to experience their experience, okay? So this has been, we've had a lot of fun with this. Okay, so then you do the user journey. This is just a symbolic representation of it. The user journey is very, very detailed. And so this is where you start to actually, you're taking all that raw information, that visual information, and you're starting to create something concrete about it. And what this is it's, okay, Eric, he wakes up in the morning and he, hugs and kisses his kids and his wife, and he listens to NPR, and then he gets in his Toyota RAV4 and he listens to Metallica on the way to work, and then he goes to this co-working space and everything's green and white, and okay, and then he sits down at his desk and he's using a MacBook Pro, and then he uses this app, and okay, here's where the pain is, right? And you go through very, very fine detail. This is the process. Here's where it breaks down. These are the things that aren't working. Here are the things that are working, okay? And then they go, they end their day. Then you have this new awakening, right? Okay, now imagine, right? Then we introduce this new product. And instead of this, it's that. Instead of feeling that pain goes away because we're going to do this way. We're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And those become your key drivers for your strategic roadmap, right? What are the core features what is our MVP? What are the most important pains that they complain about in their current process? That's what we're going to build. And here's how this thing is going to flow. It's a terrible example, but something that illustrates the point and they really get it right is infomercials, right? So you see in the infomercials, it's like, you ever try to boil a pot of spaghetti and it explodes in a nuclear fireball, and now there's this, Pasta Max 9000, and it solves all these problems that you never knew you had about making spaghetti. Of course, they're all money driven, but certainly they understand that flow, that user journey. So at this point is where we kind of end the evangelization of the user and their experience, right? So you should spend as much time there as possible so that you and everyone in your company fully understands who you're building something for, what your mission is, and so on, right? You're all there. Hurrah, team, let's go, let's build it. And so here's where we start to get technical. So the user flow takes that journey, and every one of those key pain points turns into a flow chart. Okay, well, how are we actually going to do this thing? Well, okay, we gotta, they gotta register an account. They've gotta, whatever, sign up with this and that, and they go through this. What is that experience actually going to look like? Kind of high level, but technical still. And this will actually become the blueprint for what your product is going to be. Like the buttons and the screens and the flows and the gestures and everything that they do is actually going to come out of these flows. And over time, as you create your actual screens and so on, they'll all map back to these flows. So they'll start off as just simple boxes and whatever. This could be a sketch on paper, right? One thing I want to emphasize is that you don't have to do all of this stuff before you put out anything. What you want to do is put out the lowest fidelity version of it and then get validation from your users before you invest any more into it. And you start to, again, see what works and what doesn't. Shed what doesn't work, increase fidelity on what does. So then you start creating wireframes. You start creating an actual user interface. You take these flows and you say, okay, what are these screens going to look like? And you can use a tool, so Pop, Prototype on Paper, or Envision. Is everyone using one or both or any of those tools? Everyone needs to be using one of these prototyping tools. I use Envision, Pop is fine too. So what it does is you just take an image, any JPEG, and you upload it to our server, and you can create clickable wireframes where you can draw a box around a button, an arrow, what have you, and when you click on that button, it'll take you to the next screen. You create all your flows, all these flows turn into an actual app. You can even create animation. So if you wanted to, like Flipbook, animate frames and create some sort of, more rich flow, you can do that. And you can do it with paper, you can do it with more high fidelity prototypes that come out of Sketch or what have you. But this lets you actually take your sketches and put it on a phone or put it on a computer and actually hand it to your user and say, use this, what do you think of this? Right? And you go back to them and when they're having that pain, okay, take out that old product, put in this one, how does this feel? Right? What's intuitive, what's not? Now you're having concrete. And so all you did is you have a few sheets of paper and a pen, and you're able to get real validation on your actual product before you've touched any infrastructure, any line of code, or anything like that. So again, I use Envision for everything. It's been completely transformational. So again, you start increasing fidelity. I use Sketch. Sketch is really cool because not only does it have kind of WYSIWYG drag and drop stuff for different devices and formats, but it'll actually export the word escapes me, but the real markdown of like pixels and offsets and widths and so on and so forth. So when you actually hand this to a developer, and in some cases it even spits out code, We haven't used it because apparently it's ugly, but at least you can actually create something here that you can export and say, okay, cool, I've created this wireframe. Now we can actually start using it and clicking on it and so on. So you create a static prototype, which is the product. It's the UI essentially. It's the user interface with no backend or a very limited backend. So you've got dummy data. You're kind of hard coding values, but now you actually can again put an experience in front of your users that has a real flow, that has real interactions, and you can really start getting solid user feedback. And then you move to a dynamic prototype, is where you stand up, you're beta testing at this point. You stand up your servers and your databases and your APIs, start plugging those things together. Now you got a real product, okay? And now you're beta testing with those users, and then ultimately you release. So one point I wanted to make on this. So usability testing, again, this is something I was saying you're kind of doing all along the way, and you can do it in different ways. This was just an interesting image where these folks actually created like a replica of the environment that the user would be having their experience in, right? They spent all this money so that they can have all these cameras and doing all this stuff. That's cool if if you have the money for that. But it's the importance of not only doing all of this face to face, but doing it in the environment that they're really going to be using the product. And then you launch, and then you do analytics, right? So now you've got real users, and there's a million tools out there, and there's a million ways to start looking at patterns in aggregate, right? Because people are going to tell you why they act a certain way or how they feel, but when you observe them and when you analyze them, you actually start to see the real behavior. And then the other thing is all that FaceTime stuff, it's critical, but it's also a small sample size. So as you start to grow your company, the differences between people become larger and larger, and that's where data and analytics become crucial. So that's the end of the process, right? That's an example. And again, this is a cycle. The key point I want to emphasize is as much FaceTime, as tight a connection with the user as early as possible, and tight feedback loops, increasing fidelity over time until you have a real product that you can scale. So you've released a product, you've gained some traction, you've got this core set of users that really love it, and now you're starting to scale. Now you need to start looking at tools to augment this, because your resources are limited, and there's a million of them out there. I just wanted to illustrate a few. So first thing, high level, is there are 3 ways of taking in user input. You can ask them, which tells you what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what's going on inside their head. You can observe them to see their behavior in the real world. And then you can analyze them to find, again, patterns in the aggregate, right? So some examples, ask them, obviously we talked about interviews and shadowing and so on, surveys. But automating this, there's marketing automation tools. I use Mixpanel. There's a million of them out there. SurveyMonkey and MailChimp and so on allow you to create these drip surveys so that as people go through the flow, after they've, you started using your product, you can engage with them in different ways. So one of the things that I really enjoy that we did at my last company was day 1, welcome email. You get an email, a personal letter from the CEO. Okay, it's a form letter, but it's just plain text from the CEO's email address that says, "Welcome to the community. I'm here for you. You have my direct line. Give me feedback." And we get a lot of feedback to that mail address, and we actually celebrate that. So when we do like team building events, we'll do like happy tweets and mean tweets, and that's a great way to share the love and the hate with, again, everyone at the company. These are the things in the last month that our users have told us we've done well. Great stories, in health and fitness, I'm recovering from cancer, or I'm losing a lot of weight. This is really inspiring, and it's something that, at least for me, gives a lot of motivation. And then obviously on the other side, hey, a bunch of people wrote in about this. We got to go fix this because our users are really suffering. You can also do in-app feedback. So there's ways of tying support, SDKs of tying real-time chat and support tickets and so on. But one of the things that I like to do, even just homegrown, is when you introduce a new feature, as soon as they finish that flow, you can pop up a little something that says, how was that? How was that experience right now? Thumbs up, thumbs down, tell me more if you like, right? People do that. How do they do it today? oh, would you like to rate my app? No, I don't love you yet, you know, and all you want is, you just want to take from me, you know. But something as simple as, you've just experienced this new feature, or you've just experienced this product, you know, how was it, right? It's a way to gather some feedback. So we observe them. Obviously, again, you can do this in person, and in person is really important. I'm a big proponent of usertesting.com, which is really cool. So basically, you know, it's a paid service where you pay people to go through a flow. And they're random people out there on the internet, and it's a little biased because they're kind of people who get paid to, you know, test apps all day. But you can at least filter out the demographic and find people that are similar to your core demo. And it just takes video, and they kind of rattle off their thoughts as they're going through it. And you can stop along the way and ask them questions, and you can survey them at the end. And we've just had some incredible feedback because, you know, these are people they've never seen the app before, they don't know who we are, and they just take this thing off the rails so fast in ways that we never would have imagined, you know. And so it's, you know, every time we do a major release, we at least get a half a dozen or so of these videos. The whole company gathers around and we watch them, and it's certainly eye-opening. And then one other thing, which is really creepy, I always get groans every time I talk about this. So there's this SDK called StartupSD. Is anyone familiar with it? Okay. So this is an SDK. It's a part of the Fabric suite. It was built by Twitter. Now it's owned by Google. It allows you to take real-time video of their entire session when they're in your app. So they open the app, it starts recording. And everything you click, everything you do, all the audio, everything that comes out, they redact passwords and stuff, but that gets recorded. And when they close the app or the app crashes, it uploads it to the server. So I can go in and I can profile you, and I can say, you know, you're somebody who maybe you just made a purchase. Or you're somebody who churned or something like that. And I can go through and actually just watch in real time your experience and see what went right or what went wrong, tying into crash reports and whatever. But I think what's, you know, it's just kind of interesting, just a little food for thought. Every time you pick up a digital device, you're being scrutinized, you're being monitored, you're being analyzed, you're being fed through algorithms and AI. There are people that are watching what you're doing. You know, just keep that in mind as you're navigating our digital world. This is freely available. It's, you know, it's actually pretty cheap, to be honest. Yeah.
It's not video of the person.
No, it's the screen. Yeah, it's the screen.
Is that like Hotjar?
Yes, yeah, very similar. Yeah, that's a competitor. And then analysis. Okay, so obviously, you know, you want to get to a certain scale before you do this, but the key here, what I think is most important of all this is A/B testing, right? You create a new feature and you want to see how it performs. Well, it's really hard to tell how it performs unless you have a control group, okay? And so I may, you know, have an app, and then I put out a new release, and then sales go up. Well, maybe that was just seasonality. Or maybe we got, you know, there was a blog post or something like that, right? So in order to control for that, you do A/B testing, right? So people that join on the same day, in the same set of circumstances, have two fundamentally different experiences. And then you can track them over their whole life cycle, okay? How do we retain them? How much money did we earn in the long run, you know, and so on. And you're able to look back at this after a week, a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then you can actually determine what features worked and what didn't, and you can use that to drive, you know, your strategic planning going forward. So you can do this purely on the back end. Just, you know, I mean, we would just like put a tag basically in the database when we would launch something with a cohort. There's also tools like Optimizely or Optimize that kind of give you a UI to do that as well, where again, you can create these different flows and it gives you some statistics. The other thing that's kind of interesting is attribution. So if you're doing different marketing campaigns, or if you're buying users from different sources or what have you, you can actually tie it to what campaign they came from, and then again, track them over the life, because all growth is not necessarily good growth. I've spent a lot of money buying users on a platform that we retained terribly. And I've spent a lot of money for a few users on other platforms that we retain very well. So it's pretty important. Okay, so how do we tie it all together? What am I doing on time here? Almost done. So obviously, again, you go through this process, you create all these different feedback loops all along the way, and the key that ties it all together, the linchpin of this whole thing, is customer service. Okay, as I said, you are a business because of your customers. You are a business in service to your customers, whether you like it or not. Okay, and you can either chase after the money and say, how do we grow? How do I, what features or, what do I have to do strategically to raise more venture capital or what have you? And the product it's a byproduct of that process, right? You are, this is a manufacturing line where we're churning this thing out and we're spitting it out the end and the users, take it or leave it. But no, this is a process where the users are ingrained in every single step of the way. And customer service is, it's your human face to your customer, and it's the time at which they're falling down, right? They're having a struggle with your product, okay? And you're here to solve their problems. You're here to make their lives better, and no product is ever perfect. And it's something that really kind of made me just angry, is how many companies just outsource customer service, right? Just call center, minimum wage, just it's out there. The users are just, okay, you've bought our product, now I don't care about you anymore. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think you should be doing customer service as long as you can. I think every single person at your company needs to take a shift doing customer service. And I've done it. All my engineers have done it. It's a weekend, it's a Saturday, it's something, my name was Kelly. So I was Kelly, that was our customer service rep that was out there, and I had to be cheery. And people would write in, sometimes they were just, nice, but sometimes, just expletives. Well, now I have to put on a cheery face and say, well, what's behind that? Hey, I'm here for you. And I had this, I'm off the cuff, but it just came to mind. This guy wrote in and was like, F you, I'm a Marine, don't mess with me, I'm going to get my money back, and da-da-da. And I was like, hey, I'm here to support you, and what can I do for you, da-da-da. And by the end he was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't think you were people. I didn't think there was anyone listening, I was just venting, And I said, no, we're really here, we're here to make you happy. And 5-star review from this guy, okay? So there's 2 studies that I found that support this. One is on Yelp reviews. So there's a study that analyzed Yelp reviews, and they found that customers who went to restaurants who had a bad experience that was resolved by staff left better reviews than people who just had an okay experience, all right? So if you go and you don't like the meal or whatever, and the service, they fall over themselves and they give you free dessert and coupons and so on, man, they're raving about it. 5-star review. If you go and you're like, oh, okay, cool, it's fine, but it wasn't really memorable, I don't know, 3.5, 4 stars. The other one is they did this study on at proctology offices. Okay, so I don't know why they did this, but they they would give you the exam, and then as soon as they were done, they would give you a survey, and they say, how was your experience? And obviously people rated it terribly. That was awful, But then they took another group and they gave them the exam, and then they turned out the lights and they played soothing music for 5 minutes. And then they gave them the survey, right? And then they said, it wasn't so bad. It was kind of nice, actually, right? Because it's the recency effect, right? And it's that, it's that follow through. So again, customer service is your business. You want to be as close to those users as possible. You want everyone to feel their experience, everyone to feel their pain. And that's the point where, again, these people that you're devoting your lives to are falling down, and you're saying, hey, dude, I got you. And you take them to the right path. So what does this all buy you? Again, we live in a society that is driven by wealth and growth and so on. You can support that if you want, that's fine. But that doesn't have to be a means to its own end. That doesn't have to be the only purpose, okay? Again, 90% of companies, of startups fail. And if your only reason for being was to make money, then guess what? 9 out of 10 of you are going to be failures. If you dedicate your company to be service providers, even if you fail financially, you may succeed. And chances are you won't, because actually what's going to happen is you're going to have happier users, they're going to be retained, they're going to fall in love with you, they're going to tell their friends about you, they're going to be happy to pay you money, right? Getting away from this adversarial relationship of we're the snake oil salesmen and they're the lambs for the slaughter, right? They're the idiots that should be separated from their money as quickly as possible. And in addition, as you're developing this product, right, if you follow this process, you're building the right product from the first time. So you're not going back and reworking legacy code, right? You're not, course correcting with the way a lot of CEOs like to do. I think we should go this way. Let's do it. That didn't work. Let's go that way. Let's do it, right? Tons of technical debt, tons of waste, tons of burned out employees like myself. But what's really important, what you ultimately get to is this shared vision and purpose across the company. Everyone's bought in on the mission. And what this allows you to do, again, is to create a relationship of trust with your users where they really feel like you're with them along their journey. Your reason for being is to support them to make their lives better. And that trust turns into loyalty, and that loyalty turns into love. And if your users love you, they're going to tell all their friends, they're going to write about it in blogs, you're going to get on the news. All that success and money and wealth and so on is going to follow as a byproduct of it. And guess what? You get to actually be fulfilled and do some good along the way. So that's it. So thank you so much. I hope I made an impression that as you guys go out and build products and build companies that you kind of do it for the right reason. And it's hard to keep sight of this along the way, and sometimes you have to kind of pull yourself out. I'm going to be, again, I'm on my own. I'm going to be evangelizing this. I'm going to be doing talks. I'm going to be writing articles. I'm going to be getting more active in this community. And I hope to connect with you all. Follow me if you like. If you want to hang out, drink a beer, let's do it. And hope to be a part of this community for a long time. So thank you all. Have a good night.